Are we going? I believe we are. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June live stream. How's everyone doing? Hopefully we'll get people. I don't know, it keeps working, but for some reason I keep being afraid that it doesn't. But we'll see who's in the chat when they come in. But right now we have, and I'm sorry, you told me how to pronounce the name, but I'm going to get it wrong again. Tia Gopher.
Pronounce it however the hell you want it.
Okay.
Tia Gopher.
Yeah. And Chris, Darth Fenrir.
Hey.
So I guess the big thing is some of you might have noticed that the podcast disappeared from YouTube this week. So earlier today, I get on there and it's cut off entirely, not even demonetized, just off of YouTube because of a terms of service violation. Of course, they won't tell me why. I appealed to it, and 9 minutes later, the appeal denied. Now, it's a 24-minute video, a 24-minute episode. But 9 minutes later, so, yeah, I'm not happy about that, but that's how it goes. But if you want the podcast, you can get it at the usual places, podcast.bogosity.tv, or go over to bittube.tv. For some reason, it's really picking up an audience over at BitTube. So it's still around, and I'm not really gonna, I mean, at this point, I don't really care what was being said, because it got most of the views it was gonna get. Because on YouTube, I get a couple hundred views on it. It might have gotten another 100, 150 views, but it's not. It wouldn't be worth it. But so I guess that's all I had to say. How you guys doing? Chris is silent for once.
Doing well.
Yeah, sorry. I'm eating and drinking dinner, and I don't want the podcast to be filled with smacking sounds because that's gross.
Yeah, just keep it muted when you're not talking. All right, no one in the chat room yet. It says we're live. I'm always trepidatious about that until we see the first person.
I told Hawkeye about the live stream if he wants to join. So.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if he'll join. I just told him, he's doing it, so.
Yeah.
For some reason, I'm not seeing you on YouTube.
You are not seeing me on YouTube?
Yeah, I'm not seeing I'm not seeing the thing that says live stream.
I might have to take a look at that, because I have my browsers cut out to dedicate more time for this, but let me see. I guess YT Studio. I'm not used to YouTube on mobile, so let me see.
You're using
video
YouTube
performance.
mobile?
Let's see. Well, because like I said, I don't have my browsers up because I'm using all the.
Yep, I just looked it up and I don't see it either.
Are we not live? Why would we not be live? It's working on my end.
So, I heard Eric Williams is attacking you again.
Yeah, he shows up every now and then.
Yeah.
Alright, I'm gonna have to pull up Brave and see what's going on. Hopefully this won't.
It seems that every time I join, there's always some problem.
It's your fault. Give it a second to come up. It looks like it's live from my end. Oh, it's unlisted. Why is it unlisted? Maybe this will... Hang on, I'm going to stop it and restart it.
Okay.
Da, da, da.
Funny thing about Europe, I heard. I was on a furry website, and some pro-European Union furries are, who live in the UK are upset because they're like, oh, without the European Union, we won't have the copyright protections of our place. It's like, are you serious?
Are we live now? Can people see us?
Refresh. Yep, there you are.
Okay. I don't
Yep.
know how that happened, but I guess I'm going to have to make my announcement then again because y'all didn't hear it. Yeah, the announcement is just, if you're wondering what happened to the podcast this week, those of you who listen to it on YouTube, well, YouTube decided that that particular edition violated the terms of service. They won't say why, but this morning I got this really scary red $sign and the monetization thing with a slash through it. And I'd never seen that before. And I appealed, and 9 minutes later, they came back with the appeal denied. Now it's 24 minutes long. But they were able to do that in 9 minutes. And just for, I knew this wasn't going to work, but I actually tweeted to them about it, and they're like, no, well, we can't give you I might have to look up the tweet and see exactly what it was they said, but they're like, well, we can't give specifics, but, we take this very seriously, whatever it was.
Basically, they said the same thing that the authorities said to John Kay when they arrested him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, here it is. I've got the tweet up. We can't share specifics. Appeals are very carefully reviewed. So carefully, it only took them 9 minutes to review a 24-minute episode. If yours was rejected, there's nothing more we can do. And then, of course, they give me the same link that didn't help the last 100 times they sent it to me. Okay, MB Boyak says that we're...
I know how this podcast should have began. Shane DK, hey, didn't think he did anything wrong, but someone must have ratted on him because the next day he awoke to find his YouTube account had been penalized.
Shane K instead of Joseph K. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's exactly what they said. He's like, he's like, hey, where's my maid? Where's everything? I gotta get to work. He's like, oh no, that won't be necessary. Why? Well, because you're under arrest. What did I do? What am I under arrest for? We can't tell you on grounds of security purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hang on. Here's my idea. Here's my idea explaining everything. No, we can't do it. And then he has to come up with a defense, but he doesn't.
But he doesn't know what he's. Yeah, he can't come up with a defense if he doesn't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like. Yeah,
and
like,
if he doesn't come up with a defense, then that's an admission of guilt because an innocent person would come up with a defense. If he does come up with a defense, well, guilty people always try to, defend their actions. So
kind of reminds me of this really bit. It was this, I was reading Reddit and it was called Terrible Parents, and there was one really bad parent story. I don't know if it's true because it is Reddit, but if it is true, that's some bad parents. But apparently, this one girl during a birthday party, her sister destroyed the cake, and this caused, the girl to cry, but nobody saw the sister. And the parents automatically assume she did it, and even though she did it, and she says, no, it wasn't me, it was my sister. No, we're going to say you did it because you're crying, and if you didn't do it, you wouldn't be crying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Actually, well, it's also when they say, well, he lied to police. Innocent people wouldn't do that. Yes, they would. Because they don't want to, go to jail for something they didn't do.
They do it. They do it all the time. Usually the lie is they did commit the crime.
Well, usually they would say something like, I wasn't even here because, they know they didn't commit, and then they find out they were here. Oh, that's evidence of guilt. No, it isn't.
Yeah. I actually think South Park made fun of that one time where Butters confesses to committing a crime and his parents come in and ground him, and they say, you didn't commit the crime because around the time the crime occurred, you were at home with us. And he's like, well, I'm sorry, Mom and Dad, but they held me for hours and wouldn't take no for an answer. Then they gave me this weird drug that made me all loopy, and And then
Yep.
they ground him. Yeah.
They ground him for confessing to something he didn't do. Yeah. Hello, JC Armitage.
Yeah, Butter's parents are terrible. Yeah.
Pretty much all the parents in South Park are
Yeah.
terrible.
I saw this one joke though about terrible parents, where they asked the guy, why are you being so mean to your kids? It's like, well, that's how my dad raised me. Well, that's how my dad raised me. And it shows him flashback when he was a kid and he said, son, the reason I'm doing this to you is because that's how my dad raised me. And then it shows him as a young kid and he's like, and the guy's like, son, I'm doing this to you because that's how my dad raised me. And then the guy's mom says, no, your dad did that to you because he was a raving alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's how it starts. It's like your great-great-grandpa was a raging alcoholic loser who would beat up anyone just because for the hell of it. And your great-grandpa says, oh, I guess that's how we must raise our kids. And it creates a nasty cycle.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be hard. Do you think spanking is horrible today? They'd make the kid go out and cut a switch off a tree, to be, whacked with, basically caned. And if the switch wasn't big enough, they got extra lashes and all that.
No, yeah. I mean, if I recall correctly, 100 years ago, a lot of, the parental guidance said if your child is acting up, just take a belt or a twig and give them a good whacking on the backside.
Yep.
But then again, that was also the time when they thought that electroshock therapy and turning the person into a brain dead vegetable was the best way to treat mental illnesses.
Well, the lobotomy was never really about treating the illness. It was just about making them easier to take care of. And
it was all about how, basically it was, it's like, oh, my wife or son or daughter, they have bipolar disorder, and when they get attacked, they just become so violent. I don't know what to do with them. Oh, I know what to do. Pokes them in the brain, and the person becomes a vegetable. There, now they're no longer violent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can totally understand looking back why so many people, wanted the mental asylums closed down because they were actually pretty horrible places.
Oh yeah.
But the problem is all they did was just kind of turn them out on the street, with no other options.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I hate about a lot of people saying, "Oh, why don't we have state mental institutions back?" Well, we shut them down for a reason,
Yeah, there were really good reasons to shut them down.
Yeah, there's a mental health advocate, who does say, he does want to treat people, but here's the thing, people always say, yeah, but my son or daughter is so mentally ill that they wouldn't voluntarily seek treatment and whatnot, and they said, yeah, and you want to know what happened when we had that mentality? People were getting abused because the mentality was, oh, you're too mentally ill to know what's good for you, so we're gonna do all this for you because it's good for you.
GD Dark, this will last until about 10 p.m. Eastern, which is about an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
We were a little late getting started. Sorry about that, but we...
Yeah, and actually also that same mental health expert, he even said, look, even though we don't like seeing mentally ill people on the street, the sad truth is that if they're legitimately not harming anyone and they're relatively healthy and figuring out a way to take care of themselves, sometimes you just gotta let them do that,
Yeah, but when you look at the way it's getting in places like LA and San Fran,
Well, the reason that happens is because the big government encourages them to do that,
Yeah.
Yeah, they're encouraging them to do that, and every time people try to say, hey, look, there's some people passing on my property, they're blocking my entrance, I want to kick them out, the politician's like, oh, you can't do that, they're impoverished. Who are you to kick them off,
Trying to say the crime rate skyrocketed after they were shut down. What do you guys think about this? I haven't seen the statistics, so I can't really say.
Well, I find that very hard to believe, though, because it has been proven that mentally ill people are actually far less likely to commit a crime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the people who were shut up in asylums wouldn't have been like randomly selected mentally ill people. There would have been a reason why the courts ordered them to be put away. So
Yeah.
It might have been the ones who were violent were the ones being shut up, and then they were. I don't know. Like I said, I haven't looked into it.
Yeah, you know,
I don't know. Everything I've seen about the crime rates is it escalated after the war on drugs.
yeah,
That's really what did it.
yeah, you know.
Which, I mean, might be part of it because, you know, it's mental illness. That's one of the things that can drive addiction. And without treatment, a lot of, you know, mentally ill people turn to drugs and,
Yeah, actually,
you know.
if I recall correctly, the guy who developed LSD, didn't he say that if they could properly develop and get it to a less, you know, intense, you know, effect, it actually would have made a really good, you know, antipsychotic drug. But
Well, that's why it was developed.
yeah, but because hippies were using it, you know, to have orgies and see pretty colors, the government was like, oh, it's an evil drug.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
Wasn't
it's
the
because
government trying to use LSD as like to mind control people or something?
Yeah, MK Ultra. Yeah.
but I mean, it's
I mean,
like
it's
the hippies. They went against the hippies because they were against the war, and Nixon couldn't have people who were anti-war, and so he had to
Yeah.
have reasons to go against the hippies.
Yeah. I've actually heard that's the reason, you know, began, although it goes back to the prohibition days, you know, the war on drugs today was because of that, because a lot of the people who were using drugs were the anti-war. And, you know, you can't arrest for saying, I'm not going to Vietnam. Oh, but you have a little bit of marijuana. Yep, you're going to jail now.
We're breaking up a little bit there.
Oh,
Chris.
sorry.
I'm gonna try and see. There
I
was a setting that would help with that. I forget what it was.
You know, I don't get why people are, you know, haven't learned anything from the prohibition of alcohol.
Yeah, or the prohibition of anything else.
Yeah. They always then they always pull a Todd Howard and say, well, it just works. I don't know if you'll get that, Shane, but a lot of gamers will get that.
No, I didn't get that.
Oh.
I read the thing once. I think it was like a Tumblr post or something, or maybe Reddit. So someone said if alcohol were discovered, you know, now instead of thousands of years ago, very soon after it being discovered, it would be made illegal.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I mean, it's far more horrible than any of the drugs that are currently illegal. I mean, it's not just mind altering; it can actually do things like make otherwise peaceful people violent. You know.
Oh yeah, you know.
Which very few, if any, of the other drugs do.
Yeah. Which, by the way, Shane, that's a big pet peeve of mine that I hear with a lot of drinkers is like, no, come on, man, you gotta drink. You know, it'll bring out your inner self and confidence. Like, no, it doesn't.
I love the way Bill Cosby said it. It was like, oh, why should I drink? I said, well, because it intensifies your inner personality. And I said, yes, but what if you're an asshole?
Yeah. Oh, Shane, you mentioned Bill Cosby. You support the raping of women. In all honesty,
yeah.
I still don't know what to think about that, because
I don't know. As far as I can see, it was just the parade. Really, that's what it was. Conviction by parade. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, show me actual evidence, and it's one thing, but you know, you can't say, "Oh, well, you know, 25 people said something."
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually heard from one person that said, you know, he's pretty certain that Cosby did rape, you know, one or two of those women, which, yeah, he should be punished for, but this idea that he was a serial molester that would abuse his authority like that, he says, I doubt that, especially because the first lady who accused him of that, it was proven that she was lying about it, because she claimed, oh, he assaulted me, you know, during this, you know, event, and people were like, Bill Cosby wasn't at that event.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't. No.
But I mean, you have a famous person like that, and someone accuses them, and then you have, you know, a bunch of people, I guess, who are gonna either looking for their 15 minutes or hoping to get an out of court settlement or something like that. So I don't know. But I mean, that really shouldn't. I mean, can we separate people who are imperfect and do terrible things from the art they produce? Because, I mean, Michelangelo was having sex with an underage boy, you know.
Yeah. I can, I mean, and, same thing with Kevin Spacey. I mean, yeah, he did some bad stuff, but you still gotta admit, he made some good movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, someone like that, I can understand why they wouldn't want to work with him.
Yeah.
But what I think is bogus is stuff like, Harvey Weinstein. They were saying things like, oh, well, we need to take his name off of all the movies he produced. It's like, wait a minute, he still produced them.
Yeah.
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 It's like you're trying to unperson them or something.
His name, and if they remove his name from the movies he produced, just what would they replace it with? Produced by blank.
Mm-hmm. They're trying to unperson him. That's really what it is.
Actually, a summer thing happened to a cartoon show that I'm surprisingly watching called The Loud House. It was made by famous Nickelodeon, writer and whatnot, Chris Savino, and he got accused of sexual misconduct of some interns, and Nickelodeon fired him and whatnot, and his wife divorced him. And look, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but the problem is I did some research and I can't find any evidence that he did that other than witness testimonies,
I can't help but wonder, though, given the Hollywood culture and everything, I can't help but wonder how much of that is people who are guilty of it themselves trying to make people look away from them,
I've actually heard that's actually why actual celebrities, who have been legitimately, sexually assaulted in Hollywood, that's why they hate, things like the Me Too movement, because it's actually hampering their stuff, because, we can't just be pointing at random people and taking their word for it, That's
like Corey Feldman, he's trying to raise, I think, $10 million or something like that, not only for legal protection, but personal protection as well, because he says with everything he knows, it'll destroy a lot of careers of a lot of powerful people.
Yeah, and a lot of people are like, oh, why don't you just release it now? The longer you wait, the more, those people are going to get abused. Well, because it's not easy like that,
Yeah.
He wants to make sure he has everything ready. Otherwise, those powerful people he's planning to expose, they can easily argue in court, oh, well, everything Corey Feldman did, that's just hearsay, and the courts will agree with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta have something to come forward with.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just, then I said that on a blog, what happened with Chris Savino, I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying until I see some evidence, like recordings of the alleged phone calls and all that. And of course, the better excuse that I've heard from a lot of people saying, oh, well, if Chris Savino was innocent, why did Nickelodeon fire him? It's like, oh, I don't know. Maybe because he was accused during the Harvey Weinstein and Me Too movement, and companies, were panicking. And basically, if anyone came forward and said, oh, Mr. Funny, they're like, Mr. So-and-so, you're fired. Get out of here. Because they didn't want to risk a lawsuit,
It's not a new thing. That's how Fatty Arbuckle's career, got tanked back in the 1920s.
Yeah, I read all about that, and that was so tragic. And funny thing is that it was all because of a public testimony from a guy who was a known con man.
Well, it was started by so Fatty Arbuckle, for people that don't know, is this just amazing silent film star, and sadly we don't have a lot of his films left because of this. Most of the ones that are new are ones he appeared with Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin, who supported him through all this, by the way. But he was at a party, and there was this woman there who died of, I think, like a ruptured bladder or something like that.
Yeah, she died of sepsis caused by a ruptured bladder.
Yeah. And a friend of hers, and I don't even know what her motivation was, if she was going to extort money from her or something like that, but she lied and said that her friend had died because Arbuckle had raped her. And as you can guess from his nickname, his real name was Roscoe Arbuckle, but Fatty was a nickname because he was quite overweight, that, lying on top of her made her bladder rupture. And man, you want to look at a case of con men and just dishonest prosecutors who should be disbarred, and just everything they'd handle with that.
Yeah.
And I mean, even problems like it took 3 trials, because the first trial ended in a hung jury, because of one woman who just refused to convict, who, it turns out, it was something like her husband or something worked for the prosecutor's office or something. It didn't come out until after the trial. And then in the second trial, Arbuckle didn't take the stand, and a couple of the jurors kept trying to vote guilty because, oh, well, if he was not guilty, he would have taken the stand. And so in the third trial, they just gave it their all, and they exposed the other side as liars, and Arbuckle took the stand and won them over. And it took the jury 5 minutes to come back with a verdict.
Well,
it only took them 1 minute to reach the verdict. The other 4 were spent composing an apology, which they read out in court. And I mean, read all this online. It's just an amazing story.
Still, going back, that argument of, well, if he was innocent, why didn't he take the stand? Well, I've watched Legal Eagle, and Legal Eagle, who's a lawyer, says the thing is, 100% beyond a shadow of a doubt innocent, do not take the stand because the emotions are high. There's a lot of stuff to lose, and you might accidentally say something which is perfectly harmless, but the jury or the prosecutor can easily take it as, oh, see, he's acting suspicious.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can manipulate all of that. Yeah, if the first rule is, if the prosecutor didn't make their case, don't do anything. Go up and down, rest, go straight to closing arguments. But otherwise, put all the other witnesses up there. But if you can use other witnesses and evidence to take down the prosecutor's case, then you do not let your defendant testify.
It's pretty funny, Shane, because a lot of people always talk about, it's like, man, I wonder how crimes got solved, before the days of DNA evidence and whatnot. It's like, well, surprisingly, and here's the thing, and actually we pointed this out, the reason is because police actually, back in those days, for the most part, usually did their job, and they actually tried to look for it.
Yep.
It's becoming...
I've been busy all day, I've been cutting firewood and shit.
Hey there, Wes.
Po boy.
Yeah.
So what's going on today? What's today's topic, guys?
Well, right now we're talking about accusations of stuff, and JT Armitage just brought up Michael Jackson. And the thing about Michael Jackson is none of the things they pointed out make any sense, because if you look at people who do that sort of thing to children and what they do to attract them and groom the children and things like that, it is completely different than what Michael Jackson did. It looked like Michael Jackson was mentally just a kid himself.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people. That's a lot of people who met Michael Jackson say, is that he has a kind of that, and even then, that's easily explainable because he grew up in an abusive Jehovah's Witness household. So,
and it's been
and his father was doing all sorts of things to exploit him because he was the lead for the Jackson 5 and he was making all the money, and it was doing stuff like giving him hormones so his voice wouldn't change and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Also, it's been alleged that it's possible. We can't. I don't know if we can. I don't think there's proof of it, but it's very possible, and it's even been alleged by multiple people more than once that his dad probably raped him as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well,
and
again.
And another thing is, I think that the whole regardless of my disagreements with Rageaholic's video on copy cringe, I do think that he did one of the best videos I have ever watched on Michael Jackson around. He goes through the detail by detail, look at the absence of evidence and all the burden of proof shifting on the plaintiff's behalf, and all the bullshit around the court cases were so shoddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, Michael Jackson did grow up in a Jehovah's Witness household, and according to ex-Jehovah's Witnesses I've talked to, the rule of Jehovah's Witness for children is you can't have a childhood because that's worldly pleasures, and that's against the Bible.
Okay, something happened. I didn't get the alarm or Eggleston dancing, but it looks like we have a super chat from Forrest Sparrow for $2.99. Pair character. Oh, there we are. There's Eccleston. It just took him a minute. Yeah. Pair character punching the air with fist and bump written on his knuckles. Okay. I guess that's a description of what I would see if. Yeah. I guess that description of what I would see if they could show graphics on this thing.
Hollywood only, JC Armitage says Hollywood only seems to be profitable because of IP. If/when IP falls, Hollywood will fall with it. Well, yeah, that's the only reason the Disney Corporation's in power.
Well, I mean, if you look at the stuff they're doing now, remakes and reboots and everything else, and just a dearth of original ideas, that's what IP does. IP doesn't spur creativity and inhibits it.
Yeah, that's actually also why Disney is buying everything up, is as partially because they really have no choice, because it's not like the old day where Walt Disney would say, you know, hey, I read this really good book, I want to make a movie out of it because it was in the public domain. Nowadays, it's like, oh, nope, we don't own the rights to it, so we got to buy the company that owns the rights to it.
Yeah.
Which is actually hurting them in the process because, I mean, you know, people are talking about how, oh yeah, Disney's buying Fox and all that. Yeah, and guess what? They're actually struggling for it.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys think that Disney Plus is going to end up being a good idea or a bad idea?
From what I repeat that, please.
Do you think Disney Plus is going to end up being a good idea or a bad idea?
Oh yeah. It's already kind of got a lot of mixed baggage in it as we speak. It could go either way, but it's already got some mixed baggage in it all as is. Not even counting the fucking propaganda mixing additions into some of the remakes that my folks cussed when they saw them.
Well, from what I've read, the only reason people have Disney Plus is to watch The Mandalorian.
There's that, and there's like a couple of other shows they just got.
Yeah,
I think there was I think it was a Disney. No, Disney wasn't bought out by Disney, were they?
No, Marvel was.
Marvel. Yeah, I think there was a Marvel show that was on Disney Plus that was really kick-ass. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember what the name of it was, but
I just want to say, way back on the podcast when that happened, I predicted that, you know, Luke Cage and all the other Marvel stuff on Netflix would be going away, and what happened?
Yeah, I know.
You know, they were still really popular, and people were wanting another season, and for some reason they just didn't happen. And
yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, fun. Yeah, speaking of IP, I actually learned something interesting when I started working with Domino's. I was talking to the manager of our store. Now, apparently, this guy was the son of some people who got involved, you know, in Domino's very early. So they were the managers of several, you know, districts of Domino's. And I was talking about the Noid incident, and he said, actually, contrary to popular belief, you know, the incident where that guy named Noid took a store hostage, that's actually not the reason we got rid of the Noid. The reason why Domino's dropped the Noid was because despite the fact that it was the mascot of Domino's didn't actually own it. It was owned by the advertising company, and when they switched to a different advertising company, the company that owned the Noid said, "Fine, you can't use them then." Yeah.
Yep. Got to read the fine print on that stuff.
Yep.
If I may make a comment, I wanted to reply to Armitage or JC's little piece when talking about IP. So they said Hollywood only seems to be profitable because of IP if or when it falls.
Yeah, I know. That's what I just said.
Yeah. I also wanted to add another adage that from the get-go, you had communism propaganda spewers and advocates funneling money in from other countries directly into it from the fucking get-go. It didn't turn red, folks. It's been red from the start. So that was another factor that held them in for so damn long. And some of them still do it, mainly China. Do you know how many times different actors that finally opened up to say it got shit for it?
Yeah. It's pretty funny about China.
What was the dude that played what was the name of that guy that played as the kid that got Captain America's shield at the end of Avengers Endgame, or what the final Avengers movie, or Tony Stark died? What was that guy's name? That actor's name that played that kid?
I don't know.
I haven't seen it yet, so thanks for spoiling it.
Sorry. Didn't know.
Yeah, and
Heather and I were going to try and catch up with those on our vacation, and normally that would be this week because our 5th anniversary was yesterday. And so we tried to do it on our anniversary, but, because of Corona and everything else with things not being quite up and back up yet, we're having to do it next month. So.
Well,
You know what? If they make
Thanks.
another
I
season,
haven't seen like the past. I don't know how many Marvel movies are there now. I haven't seen so many. There's just way too many to keep up.
Yeah.
I was gonna say this. If they do make another episode of South Park, they should make an episode about the coronavirus and how Disney, and how how Mickey is on the verge of bankruptcy, and a guy next to Mickey is like, it's like, yeah, look, we spent all this money trying to appease China, and what they give us in the end? A highly contagious and very dangerous respiratory virus. Thanks, China.
But yeah, I was trying to remember who that guy's name was. Sorry about the spoiler, and congrats on the anniversary, by the way. My apologies for the spoiler, folks.
Oh, great, Wes. Now you're going to become obsessed with it. You're one of those people where it's like, what was the guy's name? Damn it, I can't do anything else until I figure out his name.
IMDb.com.
Like
Just
two
look it
parts of
up.
my brain, one's going, you try ABC, and I'll try D, E, and F, fucker. One of those moments. I'm going to be one of those guys at those moments.
Just look it up. IMDb.com.
Yeah.
Well, there was one funny thing too that came out of Disney Plus and Disney buying Foxes. We saw that funny Simpsons commercial where they're dressing up like Disney characters, and Bart comes out just like Mickey Mouse, and he's like, "I don't care if they own us. I'm not doing it. Boy, you get in pose for the picture. I swear." Yeah. It's improv.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all BLM and social justice until China says otherwise.
Oh yeah.
And it's so painfully blatant. I'm like, yikes.
That's another reason why I hate it when they make SJW characters. It's because you can clearly tell they mostly don't really give a damn about, women's rights and whatnot. They're just doing it because they want to appeal to the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it keeps backfiring. You'd think they'd learn sooner or later.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the thing. You cannot appease, social justice wars, because if you make a strong female character, they're going to be like, she's too pretty, or, she has a male friend who she occasionally relies upon, and stuff like that.
I have not heard anything about the virus sticking to pollen. From what I have heard, Far Sparrow, it's just direct human-to-human contact. What they're actually finding out, what a lot of the epidemiologists have been saying all along, is that it's really sustained indoor contact that does it. So really, locking down, and never going outside was one of the worst things you should do. If you're outside but you're distancing yourself from everyone, then you're not cramped in the same area, breathing the same air as everyone else.
Well, yeah, that's why a lot of people get sick during the winter, because we're cramming ourselves in buildings, we're locking all the doors and sealing it off, so we don't get cold. And the process is all the germs we breathe, burp in, flick off our skin just pile up, and they don't get filtered out or destroyed by outside, microbes. They just stay there. So,
yep. Hello, Scorch.
Thing. I'm looking it up right now. Okay, I know the character's name. Let's see.
It's just one of those things. I did the same thing. Heather and I are watching something. Hey, that's that guy. Where have we seen him? Who is he? I don't know. And of course, I have to grab my phone and pull up IMDb and look it up.
By the way, Shane, speaking of movies, I've lost a lot of respect for Patrick Stewart now, because I saw this interview on Vice that he did, and guess what? He's pro-European Union.
Yeah, that's typical, though.
Yeah.
If they're a British actor of any real caliber, they're going to be pro-EU. And if they're not, they'll probably say they are because they want to keep working.
Well, yeah, because I'm pretty sure if they say we're pro-Brexit, a lot of European, CEOs are gonna say, well, then you're not welcome here and there,
Well, it's like if you watch, BBC stuff, and that's all you see are BBC shows, the only view you'll get is there are the Remainers, and then the Brexiters are all these, racists and horrible people and things like that. Whereas if you actually talk to people from Britain, there are a lot more people who want to Brexit than you get the idea of just looking
Oh,
at.
I found the guy's name I was talking about, Anthony Mackie.
And here's
he got a bit of shit for saying that.
And here's the thing, Shane. Is a lot of it's a lot of the negative stuff that's going to come out of Brexit. From what I've read, it's not because of the UK becoming isolationist. Rather, it's the European Union about to implement these rules against them as retaliation, basically.
Yeah. Boy, I don't really have a problem with them making a diverse cast, but they're not making a diverse cast because, these were the best people to hire, or they have, something in mind that would make that work. It's a completely arbitrary decision to try to appeal to people with no story reason or character reason for it, and it's just pandering, and it just doesn't come across well.
You know what this kind of reminds me of? It reminds me of that animated show Kubo and the Two Strings, where it got criticized because they were casting white actors to play Japanese characters. And here's the thing: if this was live action, you would have a point. But here's the thing: it's animation. They're gonna look Japanese no matter what you do to them. So.
Well, like there was one point where you had all those radio shows from the 50s, and one of them was Amos and Andy, which was a black cast. And when it came out that it was white people doing the voices, there were all these people who hit the ceiling and tried to because you used to be able to buy tapes of it and everything, and.
Yeah, that's another fun fact is that we like to hate on people who wear blackface, but from what I heard, blackface was actually popular with a lot of white actors who were trying to actually advocate for blacks.
Well, it actually ended up providing cover because the reason for it was there were all these laws in all these places saying that black people can't act or black people can't be on the same stage with whites or whatever, and so that was really the only way to have a black character. Was to have a white person in blackface, but the thing is, once they have the blackface on, you can't tell, so they could actually hire a black person, put the black person in blackface. In fact, there were actually entire troops of black actors who'd put in blackface and go and do it, and because usually, the idea of the kind of racist, black and white minstrel, playing on the banjo and the stereotypical and everything. That was true, with a lot of the white casts. But, you like I said, you had black casts come in, and they say the character of those troops was just completely different. They would do more dramatic things and, characters with better depth to them and things like that, or, different styles of humor. All that. So it actually provided cover for some of them to slip in under the radar.
Yeah, that's another funny thing too. There was that one really old cartoon, about that girl from Harlem that goes to the deep south and she sees, the stereotypical black people with the big lips and the deep accents and all that. And a lot of people saying, "Oh, that was racist," and they were trying to prove it. It's like, no. First of all, the lady doing the singing, she's black herself. She was based on a black actress. And second of all, it seems to be actually pro-black because it's promoting jazz and all that.
Well, it happened because Bob Clampett was really into the LA jazz scene, which was predominantly black. And because of the way movies were, they just weren't getting coverage, they weren't, getting featured and things like that. And he thought that, their music and their entertainment and their personality should be preserved, so he put them in several cartoons. In fact, there were a couple of cartoons where it's just them. And of course, those are banned for being racist.
And here's another funny thing is that a lot of the white characters in Looney Tunes, they were based off of negative stereotypes like
Elmer Fudd?
Yeah, Elmer Fudd, he was based off of, a stereotypical, I don't know what he was trying to stereotype, but it was like I guess it was the Midwestern type of people.
Yeah, or Yosemite Sam.
Yeah, was a stereotypical, deep Southerner, who,
Oh no, he was Western. He was Western. Foghorn Leghorn was a Southerner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a satirization of Texas, and Foghorn Leghorn was a satirization of Farm Boys, and I think, let's see, I forgot what the fuck Elmer Fudd was. He was all over the place with his and what he was based off of.
Well, they had in his first cartoons he was kind of portly, and the idea was, he was kind of the city slicker who wanted to go hunting and didn't know anything about hunting or the outdoors or
Yeah, and
something
he
like
was
that.
also based off of his original voice actor and appearance when they first drew him
there was
out before they
actually
cranked him up and
there was
inflated
actually
his head.
Yeah, they based it on Roland Q. Bryan. Yeah.
Yeah, there was actually an episode where Elmer Fudd, said, "Oh, I'm sorry, but I'm a vegetarian. I just hunt for the sport, And like you said, I think that's what they were trying to mock. They were trying to mock, the city people, who had money and went hunting because, well, isn't that what rich people do? But they have no idea how to do it, what they're doing, and all that.
Yeah, basically city slicker Yankee that tries to hunt but don't know what they're doing. That sounds about right. I forgot what the fuck they. There's so much shit they they based Bugs Bunny on. I think it was just original.
Yeah.
But Bugs Bunny developed over a period of time because there was this white rabbit that doesn't resemble him in any way, but it was a Bugs Hardaway cartoon, which is where Bugs gets his name. And then there were a couple with like a gray hair, like Chuck Jones and Bob Clampett, and he was kind of loony and zany, and he looked like a rabbit version of Goofy. And then it was a wild hair in 1940. Tex Avery was the one who really nailed his character, the voice, the model sheet, and everything, which is the first official Bugs Bunny cartoon, although he didn't get that name until a couple of years later. But yeah, and that was the thing because Doc, calling someone Doc was a colloquialism from Dallas, where Tex Avery was from, and that entered the nationwide vernacular after he had Bugs Bunny saying that. So it's because of Tex Avery we have What's Up, Doc.
But fun fact, Mel Blanc, he actually didn't like carrots.
He was allergic to them.
Yeah.
He had to spit them out.
Yeah.
But they tried celery, they tried parsley, they tried all sorts of other, and they couldn't find anything that sounded like carrots except carrots. But he had to spit them out, otherwise he would have had an allergic reaction.
Yeah.
Oh, Mel, I watched him. I think it was David Letterman or Johnny Carson. I think it was an early David Letterman season where Mel Blanc appeared on, and he taught a trick to the audience on what to do. I'm about to do it with my shirt. He did it with a towel. What you do is you get a piece of cloth, you cover your hand with it, put it over your mouth, and you go. And there you have that sound effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of those weird ones, like there was one that goes, "Hey, rip," and they're wondering like, okay, how did they do that? What kind of interesting? It was Bob Clampett's voice. Yeah. Yeah. And he did it once, and he could never recreate it. They had to keep using that same recording over and over again.
Yeah, Shane, I don't know if you remember, but there was that one, there were those two skits about that boy who has an imagination, and he daydreams a lot in school. Fun fact, he was voiced by a full-grown man. According to an interview, it's like, this guy, he was like 40 years old, but he had a rare thyroid problem, so he didn't develop properly when he was going through puberty, so his voice never cracked.
Yeah, but it's
John
weird. It's
Fiedler
weird.
You're talking about?
John Fiedler did the voice of Piglet.
Yeah. Okay. Did he have a similar problem, or is he just naturally that high pitched?
I don't know. I think it was just naturally that high pitched. I mean, God, he was in so much stuff. He was a really prolific actor.
Dude, he was also in so many seasons of the TV show Gunsmoke. You wouldn't believe how many times I was like, "Hey!"
He did a Star Trek episode. He did a Star Trek episode. He did a couple of Twilight Zones, a few Alfred Hitchcock Presents. He was in The Odd Couple. 12 Angry Men, of course.
Yeah, Piglet.
Yeah.
Yeah, Piglet. Trespassers Will. Yeah. Yeah, it's short for Trespassers William.
Mm-hmm.
Was your grandpa's last name B. Shot? Yeah. Yeah, that should have been a funny thing. Yep, it stands for Trespassers Will B. Shot. Yep, Grandpa B. Shot. Greatest man ever. Yeah.
I don't think A.A. Milne could have put that in the book, though, because that's a joke from the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could actually do I can actually imitate Cliff Edwards or Lightning Ukulele or Ukulele.
Yeah.
I can actually
Speaking-
do. I can actually make my. I can actually make my sound, sing like him and do the voice impression of Jiminy Cricket.
Speaking of which, speaking of Winnie the Pooh, I saw the Chinese president outside, caught over a tree, and he was covered in mud. And I'm like, Mr. Chinese president, why are you all covered in mud? And he's like, I'm not covered in mud. I'm a little black rain cloud.
I thought, oh my fucking god! And he wonders why they call him Ching Chong Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah. What are you supposed to be, Mr. President? I'm a little black rain cloud, of course.
Ironically, guys, they're talking about the Oscars in the chat and how you have to have a diversity rating to be eligible for the Oscars, and that makes it less relevant than it is. But they're banning Gone with the Wind, which is the first movie that got an Academy Award for an African American actor.
Yeah. And here's another funny thing about the Oscars that even before the whole diversity thing, it's actually been proven that basically to win the Oscars, you basically have to have a lot of influence. Basically,
it's almost like social justice is eating itself alive and proving its detractors correct.
Well, and the thing is, first of all, it's really stereotypical. More and more black characters are becoming like they were in those 70s blaxploitation movies.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh god, those were so cancer.
Oh god, and the other thing, the other thing about it is, it's like those characters aren't allowed to be flawed. I mean, it was like watching Star Trek Voyager again. It's just bad writing.
Those blaxploitation movies. The two main things that made me cringe were blaxploitation movies, and then movies about talking crotches. They exist. I'm sad to say, folks.
Yeah, there's a lot of sick, fucked up movies.
And most of the fucking the ones about the ladder concept were filmed by the French. I was like, of course.
Yeah.
There's a lot
of course.
Yeah.
Look, you want to see some really weird stuff? Look for Russian short films. Yeah. Russian short films are just bizarrely weird.
Yeah. Actually, one person said he knows the perfect example of what happens when you put postmodernist art in film. You get things like Human Centipede, which in my opinion,
what the fuck?
Which in my opinion is the perfect example of a postmodernist thing, because a lot of people actually ask the guy, it's like, dude, why the fuck did you make that movie? Because there's no rhyme or reason to it. The acting's terrible. Why'd you make it? And his answer was because, well, why not?
Yeah, it was just to be shocking and get some attention.
Yeah, I hate people who do that,
Yeah.
Yeah,
But, I mean, if you get the backing of a big studio and they put $1 zillion into promotion, and all you have to do is make it back opening weekend.
Yeah, Shane, you know what else used to be pretty not very, it used to not be very common in media, but now it's happening so often that it's actually becoming a cliche itself. It's the unhappy ending. You see, it's a lot in horror movies. It's not like it's not like it can end with a glimmer of hope. It's like the killer's alive and he kills the person. The end.
Well, it's like there's a deleted scene from Clerks, and what happens is Dante is about ready to close up, and Robert comes in and shoots him dead and takes the money and leaves, basically for no reason. But it was because everyone in film school told him it's like, oh no, if you do an Indian film, you have to have a down ending, and it's best if your main character dies. And he wrote it and he shot it, and he was like, this doesn't work, and he pulled it out.
Yeah. But yeah, it's becoming a problem nowadays. It's like, it's like the ending, it's like, and people are like, well, the happy endings are too cliche and they're not realistic. It's like, yeah, but last time I checked, most films, neither is, the bad guy's always winning,
Yeah, well, there's an in-between,
Yeah.
And there are bittersweet endings, and there are victories that aren't total victories, and things like that.
And
BRB, guys, hold on a moment. I got company. I'll be right back.
It reminds me
or the ones where they put in the twist just to have the twist and they didn't set up for it at all.
Oh yeah, like what Disney's been doing with a lot of their villains lately. I mean, I'm not saying
Mhm.
Twitch villains can't be bad, but you kind of
Well,
gotta
at
have a
least set up for it.
Yeah,
It's
like
not like it's like you get to the ending and you're like, oh, well, what are we going to do now? We're out of an idea. You just pull something out of your keister and put it in, but then you don't go back and revise the rest of the script to set up for it.
Yeah, I mean,
I just remembered a movie, and I was looking for it. A few minutes ago, you guys were talking about black exploitation, and I just remembered a different thing called Bruce exploitation. Do you guys know what that is?
yeah,
Aussies?
that was Bruceploitation. That was when a lot of people were making, kung fu movies, and they would get a Chinese
Oh.
guy, dress him up like Bruce Lee, and say, here's Bruce Lee, but it's spelled BRUSE Lee or something like that. Or it would be Bruce Lee as in Bruce, but it would end with LI.
Yes. So there's this one movie that just it's the most hilarious thing you'll ever see. And I was looking up the name. 1 second, let me turn off push to talk.
Yeah, I was thinking Australian there for a second because Bruce is Australian slang.
Okay, so the movie is called The Dragon Lives Again. It's
Never
from
heard of it.
77, and it's the most hilarious thing ever. So, reading from the Wikipedia page, is a martial arts fantasy comedy in which the soul of Bruce Lee goes to the underworld. The deceased Lee meets a number of pop culture icons, including Dracula, James Bond, Satoshi, Clint Eastwood, The Godfather, The Exorcist, and even 1970s soft porn character Emmanuel. Lee befriends the one-armed swordsman Kane from TV's Kung Fu and Popeye.
It's funny.
Okay.
If this isn't the most ridiculous movie ever, I don't know what is.
It's funny you mentioned softcore pornography because I once saw a documentary about pornography, and they were talking about some X-rated, pornographic movies from the first time, and they actually showed clips of it, and it turns out that was considered pornographic. If that movie were released today, it would just be an R rating.
Hmm. No, there's proper pornographic movies going all the way back to the silence.
Yeah, well,
Mostly from France, but you know how it is.
yeah. Oh yeah, the French and Germans, they love drawing women doing crazy stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just getting back to the subject. It just doesn't work because, first of all, SJWs can't be placated. Second of all, there's not enough of them to sustain an audience. It's primarily going to be about the story and characters, no matter what you do.
Yeah. What you just said there, it reminds me of that crappy movie William Shatner was involved in, Incubus, where the main reason why that movie failed was because the director insisted on making it in Esperanto. And the reason why he made that decision wasn't because, for creative purposes. It was because someone told him, hey, there's Esperanto speakers in every single continent and almost every single country, which was
Well,
true.
I thought it was actually commissioned as an Esperanto film
Yeah.
to promote the language.
Well, people were saying, well, there's Esperanto speakers all over the world, so it'll sell well in every movie. And yeah, at the time, it's true there were Esperanto speakers in every single continent, but there wasn't a concentrated population of them. So, yeah,
Wasn't enough of them.
yeah,
You can't make people just switch languages like that.
yeah. Esperanto sounds weird. It's like a weird combination of Spanish and Italian.
Well, the idea was to make a universal language that would be easy for everyone to learn, and it just didn't work. And languages are just too different.
Yeah.
To make a
and
single.
And the thing is, there already is a language that's relatively easy to learn, English. it's pretty funny because a lot of anti-Western people say, oh, English is one of the hardest language to learn to non-English speakers. No, they've actually done studies of that, and English isn't even in the top 10. The absolute hardest language to ever learn is actually Chinese.
Yeah, probably Mandarin Chinese
Yeah,
would be the
Mandarin
hardest.
Chinese, and number 2, I believe,
I
was
would think Japanese.
well, Japanese was in there. Like at number 2 was Navajo.
Navajo is so hard that they actually used it as a form of encryption in World War II. They hired Navajo speakers to transmit things, and the Japanese could not figure out what they were saying. They put their best linguists on it. They could not figure it out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and actually I've heard the same thing about the Japanese code, though. The reason why the Japanese code was so complicated wasn't because it was well encrypted. It was simply the fact that the Japanese were taking advantage of the fact that their language was complicated. But once we got some people who spoke pretty good Japanese to actually learn it, they learned, here's what it is. Because the thing with
Japanese takes a lot more syllables to say the same thing in English, and that's why on all these dub films, the bad guy says things like, "Aha! Now I will kill you, and then you will be dead, because I will have killed you, and then you will have been dead." Because they gotta fill all those syllables when the bad guy is just saying something relatively simple.
Oh yeah, that's also another reason why often direct dubbing doesn't always work when you try to take what they're literally saying, because the thing is, with Japanese, if you were to translate it literally, it would actually sound like gibberish in English, basically.
Here's a fun thing. Go to Google Translate, take whatever you want in English, translate it to Japanese, then copy the Japanese over and translate it back into English.
Yeah.
Fun stuff.
Yeah, I've done that trying to talk to someone through text, and it would love you too, Brett. I'll see y'all around.
Yeah.
I love getting like a lot of furniture from China. They're putting it together, and they're writing things in English, and they're saying like, and you put this piece in there and screw it in tight, and it will be happy and snug, and things like that. And they're like giving personality to everything. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, actually, Shane, about Japanese, I watched this video one time, and it was about Japanese culture, and one of the reasons why Japan has such a low birth rate, and they're having issues with karoshi, which means death by overwork, is because, fun fact, not a lot of people know this, in Japanese business, your language and grammar completely changes when you're in the workplace, because you got to use humble and honorific language, and you can get in trouble if you don't use the proper terms.
Yep.
Also, the other thing too, there's a reason that the herbivore movement happened as well.
Yeah.
It's another thing to consider too.
The herbivore movement?
It's basically one of the precursors to MGTOW.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's one of those movements. There's legal
incentive. No joke. In Japanese, businesses, if you don't use the proper words and all that, like if you don't use, words that basically historically, meant like lord or whatnot, you actually will get in trouble with your boss,
Because like my lord and my liege and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, like with your boss, you often have to use the word sama, which is an old word meaning lord or sir and whatnot, because you're the humble employee,
Mm-hmm.
That's another problem with Japan is that Japan is very loyalty based. I mean, people fail to realize Japan may be capitalistic, but socially they're very collectivistic because they view the community as a whole to be more important than the individual. And I'm like, well, no wonder you guys have such a high suicide rate and low birth rate, because when individuals aren't allowed to prosper,
Well, it's just kind of left over, from the lordship of the samurai. They just kind of shifted over into the leaders in these corporations.
But see, and that was a communitarian thing. And communitarians, if you understand communitarianism, individuals are responsible for the community, but they took that out. If they took that out and started becoming like collectivistic leaning instead of sticking with that,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what our I mean, that's what the communitarianism emphasizes. It's just the importance of community and the each individual contributing to the community, and that's a big part of it. That's what it's built around. They you start when you start seeing shit like what's in like Japan. That's where you start seeing that blur between communitarianism and the like outright collectivistic shit.
Oh yeah.
It's
By
like
the way,
the differences start to blur like badly.
You know what else? You know what else is hurting Japanese? The Japanese population and why they're not producing enough kids is because from what I've read, Japanese society really values old people. Basically, no joke. You have to be super duper polite to old people in Japan because they're seen as elders and whatnot. I mean, we have the same problem here in America, but nowhere near as bad as it is over there. I mean, no joke. I actually heard a story from an expat, who said, he, when he was, an expat who lives in Japan, who said that he and his wife, were trying to take their kids to a park, and they found the park was gone, and the reason is because the local government shut it down. And when they asked why, it's like, well, because an old lady complained saying that the kids, making the noise was disturbing her husband's napping, and they tried telling her, it's like, well, lady, that's kind of what parks are for. He's like, no, parks aren't for playing, they're for sitting and reading and appreciating nature. And because she's a quote unquote grandma, like, I don't know what the Japanese honorific word for it is, they have to do what she says. I mean, I'm not trying to hate on old people, but I really hate, people that say, well, you got to respect your elders because of what they went through. It's like, yeah, well, the truth is times have changed, and there's some stuff that they did back then which is unacceptable today.
Well, I mean, it probably made sense like centuries ago when the only way you could get to be an old person was to, to have a lot of life skills and survival skills, but
yeah.
That hadn't been the case in centuries.
Well, yeah, I mean, like you said, hundreds of years ago, being old was legitimate because people, rarely lived to become elderly. So if you were elderly, that meant you were either really rich or were doing something correctly, which is why people had a lot of respect for you. But today, most people are guaranteed to at least reach their 60s. So being old's kind of lost that status. The only time being old has status is if you're super duper old, like a centenarian.
Centenarian.
Well, I remember what it was like, looking at people who were 50 years old when I was growing up. I'm going to be 52 next month, and it's not anywhere close,
Oh yeah, no joke. You see pictures. You see pictures of old. Of like, I saw this one picture of that, and you see a picture of like this old looking woman, and she's got a little kid, and you're like, oh, was that a grandma and her grandson? And the guy's like, no, that was my mom. It's like, wow, she was pretty old when she had you. No, she was only in her late 30s.
Yeah.
Wait, you're turning 52?
Yep.
Holy fuck! I thought you were in your 30s or 40s.
That's what everyone thinks. They say the same about Heather. Heather's like 4 years younger than me, and everyone thinks she just turned 30. So.
Oh, I gotta ask, because how the fuck did you do it?
I'm just living my life.
It's the beauty of modern day medicine and food. I mean, that's actually, that's actually also true. We're actually, we're actually aging slowly because, we're just living, despite what a lot of people are saying, about how the processed, GMO foods. No, we're actually healthier than we were 100 years ago.
I mean, if you can avoid the pitfalls like being overweight and things like that, then I mean, we've got better food, more access to food. We've got, vaccines, so we're not getting sick every time we turn around, because that'll age you.
Yeah, it reminds me of when I was watching John Stossel, that thing he did about Sick in America. He was talking to that one Canadian doctor, and he was talking about how great, medicine has improved. He's like, take a look at Vice President Dick Cheney. He's had 4 heart attacks and he had a micro stroke, and yet there he is. He's standing up on the podium. He's waving, and he's still holding down full-time employment. 50 years ago, if he had all that and survived, he would be spending the rest of his life lying on a bed with his eyes closed.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you had a heart attack? That means you have to lie back and take it easy from now on. And nowadays you have a heart attack and they're like, okay, let's get you into rehab. Let's get you physically active again.
Yeah,
Because we're understanding more about that.
Oh yeah,
You've got the FOXO gene. I'm not sure what that gene is.
Pardon me if I'm going to, because I'm about to sound real controversial when I say this, but look at Wilhelmer Stefansson.
I'm not sure who that is.
He's the one who wrote the book, The Fat of the Land. He went to the Eskimos and the Inuits and lived with them for a long time and studied how they ate. He basically copycat the eating pattern. And essentially, he basically ate carnivorously is what he did.
Oh yeah, those vegans that say if you eat nothing but meat, you're gonna suffer a heart attack and die when you're 30 years old. It's like, dude, just look at the Eskimos and some of those northern, based American Indians. They were largely carnivores and largely survived off of fat and organ meat, and they were extremely healthy. In fact, they didn't start developing the health problems until the Western colonies came in and basically took everything they had, and they're like, well, what are we gonna eat? Oh yeah, here's a bunch of crappy grain and sugar. Eat.
You can't grow kale in permafrost. They had to eat carnivorously. They didn't have a choice. But
the problem is, if you mix carb and fat together, you start to inflame yourself. You could have all carbs, or you can have all fat. But here's the thing: which one's going to lead you to being more deficient? Yeah. And second, that's the first thing. And secondly, so the first thing was not mixing the two is what caused the inflammation. The second would be what I just pointed out. The third is a lot of what we call science and the nutrition is epidemiology, which really isn't hard evidence. It's say, hey, let's take a look and see if there's a mechanism to justify this here. And if we find it, then let's test it. And then that leads to the various kinds of trials, such as randomized crossover trials, randomized clinical trials, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you establish mechanistic data afterwards. And if you find the mechanistic data, to actually establish actual causality, then you do those kind of trials. That's how it is supposed to fucking work.
Well, because the real early stuff, the stuff you do in a petri dish or with lab mice or whatever, that's the kind of stuff that you're doing to see if there's a there, and you can establish, the causality, and then you actually see how it works in people.
Exactly. There's a lot of people out there. I'm surprised they even have medical doctorate degrees. I'm so fucking shocked.
I don't want to bring him up a whole lot, but I wonder if the fact that Eric Williams is a vegan, the reason why he acts the way he does.
Well, because the reason why we can sustain the metabolism for these really, really powerful brains of ours is because we ate meat.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually heard that. I actually read a study that says, have you ever came across a vegan and you've always noticed they've always been smug, kind of immature and yelling? Well, the sad truth, and they don't want to admit, is that their vegan diet is partially the reason why they think the way they do,
Because it stopped their brains from developing beyond a certain point or something?
Well, not stop developing from a certain point, but because it can't develop properly, it slows down a little bit, so...
Because that's exactly what you see in teenagers and young adults, kind of the arrogance and think they know everything, and it kind of you kind of got to age into the whole okay, I don't know everything, and I need to look at things more nuanced and yeah.
And
I don't know. I always thought maybe it was the other way around. It's because they were arrogant that they became vegans, and so they think it makes it better than everyone.
Definitely, vegan Gains acts the way he does because he's a vegan.
I don't know who Vegan Gains is.
You don't remember Vegan Gains? He was that quote unquote guy that proves that vegans are stronger and healthier, but he's just an arrogant asshole, and he actually got into a lot of heat because he was threatening to kill people who were eating meat.
He threatened to kill babies. He threatened to murder people on IRL, and
Yeah.
And to be honest, he's one of those people who's like, all right, if you think you can kill me, if you think you can kick my ass, let's come up with an address to meet up, and he wouldn't fucking respond because he's chicken shit.
Yeah.
He's a mix between psycho and chicken shit, to be
Yeah.
honest. God, the fucking.
But yeah, I had to resist the urge to smash my head across the desk when I was reading that response that Eric Williams did, where he was like, well, if taxation is theft, then rent is theft.
Oh God.
Yeah, it's like what you said. They can't tell the difference between sexual assault and lovemaking. It's like that's the way his brain works.
I would love to see these people spend 1 month as a landlord.
Yeah. Yeah, Mystic Jojo said he can confer to that because his mom's a landlord.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff they do.
Guys, did you realize that over half of the different fruits that vegans, especially more so than anyone else, tend to eat have to be shipped from other places, fucking back and forth across the planet, and they want to talk about climate change? Fuck right off, you hypocritical little cut rat bitch.
When most of the native stuff is perfectly fine, but what happens is, like, they did this with kale, they did this with the acai berries. You find just some kind of out-of-the-way vegetable that not a lot of people are growing, and you kind of buy them out for cheap because there aren't that many growers to buy out. And then, once you've got the market on it, then you start spreading it among the vegan community that this is a superfood. I mean, kale... kale is a green leafy vegetable, so it's good for you, but it's not any better for you than spinach or romaine lettuce. Strawberries are much better for you than acai berries. Strawberries are incredibly nutritious. But.
Yeah. See, if you don't mind, I'd like to go into just a very short tangent about the term. Superfood should only be the term superfood should only be consistent of three things. The term should only be defined by three. Excuse me. Ooh, don't know where that came from. I didn't even eat today. Three things. One, it should be absurdly high nutrient density. Or two, a medicinal property in said food. Or three, all the above.
Yeah. Yeah, and here's another thing that a lot of vegans won't tell you. They always talk about how, but if you eat steak, there's chemicals in steak that can give you cancer. Guess what? There's chemicals in a lot of fruits and vegetables that if you were to eat, your body weight in them every day for the rest of your life, it would eventually give you cancer.
Yeah. Everything would.
I mean, when you really think about it, and a lot of people have jokingly pointed this out, almost every chemical has carcinogenic properties to a degree. It just depends. It's the dose that's important.
Yeah.
And most
it's how much you get and how long you get it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You go ahead. Sorry, you first.
It's just how much you get and how long you get it.
Yeah, they act like every single chemical is like asbestos, where if you get even a little follicle in there, your chances of developing the mesothelioma skyrocket, but it's not like that.
No, what's funny though, Fenrir, what's really funny is, for example, how polyphenols work, some of them anyway. They act as a tiny degree of a stressor to make your body enact to record them. In other words, induce a form of hormesis. Some polyphenols work that way. Some of them feed the different bacteria in your intestinal tract. That's only scratching the surface of what they've looked into when it comes to these compounds like polyphenols and shit. Yeah. They've already shown that when you combine, the grapeseed has blood flow promoting properties. The extract of grapeseed, not the shitty oil. Put that in a diesel tank, not on my store shelf. Yeah. And then you're looking into the fucking benefits of garlic, for Christ's sake. That's astonishing.
Yep.
And you have actual things, and they make standardized, pharmaceutical or pharmacognosy, grade either or, because it's the same process. You have to use pharmaceutical chemistry to do pharmacognosy. That's how it works.
Yeah,
Real
JC,
learning is to study the plants, and then it leads to the finding of the actual shit that works, trialing it, then making a standardized compound through pharmacognosy using pharmaceutical tech.
JC Armitage says, I'm still convinced vegan gains got his muscle through steroids, not from vegan food. And I'm like, that's the funny thing, because the funny irony is that it's impossible to be 100% vegan, because almost every single chemical and medicine we take never would have been developed if it hadn't been for testing it on animals.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what's funny?
Yeah.
I have a you realize that you realize that the way we're farming, Chris Christian was talking about this on Joe Rogan's podcast, and it was brought up by other people. The way we're farming without putting back enough, a lot of farmland might have 60 more years of good soil, good harvest from them, until we actually start to make incentives to actually put back more.
Yeah, especially things like nitrogen.
Yeah. Well, again, one of the reasons why a lot of farming is, bad for the environment these days is largely because of subsidies. We're paying we're paying farmers to grow crappy crops or not sell them. I mean,
Well, and also they're prohibited or at least disincentivized from doing the proper rotation. So, like, you would have like only part of your farmland that's actually producing the product, and the rest of it you plant stuff that's going to help replenish the soil, and then you just change that from year to year. But
speaking of chemicals in food, do you think nutrition / GMO labeling does more harm than good? I do believe
absolutely.
It does. Yeah, because even if it's 100% safe, people say, oh well, if it's still safe, then why do they label it? I mean,
that's exactly what happened to thimerosal in vaccines.
Yeah,
exactly.
Hey guys, can I speaking of GMOs, this would have been a patent application. I thought of this like about 6 years ago. I actually had a patent application paper being written down and everything, right? Since I don't believe in patents and copy cringe, I want to open source it here. It's basically to GMO the slippery elm tree so it can produce an antifungal chemical that's safe for all kinds of livestock, cats, dogs, and humans alike, that can actually fight and kill Dutch elm disease.
That's pretty cool. But yeah, a lot of people do that. It's called defensive patenting, because what it does is it prevents someone else from patenting it and closing it up.
Well, this particular concept is a little bit different, because there are some very powerful antifungal agents given out by the neem tree. And if they find and the idea was if they ever find the genetic trait, the actual genes the gene or 2 or 3, whatever, how many there could be, that make these compounds, the very staunchly antifungal ones, they could take those genes and genetically modify the slippery elm and Dutch and other trees and see after they test it against Dutch elm, which I'm sure they have somewhere or another. But that was my GMO idea.
And here's another funny thing too, is that genetic modification, that's just part of evolution and nature,
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like Greenpeace was committing literal acts of terror over golden rice, blowing up shipments and burning down crops and things like that, because it's this horrible thing. They took a bacteria gene for beta carotene, and stuck it in rice. Well, where do you think that gene in sweet potatoes comes from? Thousands of years ago, or however long it was, there was horizontal gene transfer from bacteria into the sweet potatoes that gave them beta carotene. Pretty much the exact same process. You look at it genetically, it looks the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's like.
And guess who eats sweet potatoes? Very common. Guess what sweet potatoes are common? The blue zones, the low longevity hotspots called the blue zones. Now, don't listen to the vegan lenience bias bullshit they tell you, but these are eaten by the Japanese, like the Okinawan Japanese, and I think the Nicoya Peninsula Costa Ricans, especially in decent amounts, and they're capable of growing them in their own yards and all over the place. And these have absurd numbers of 100-year-olds over everywhere else. So maybe some of that purple pigment promotes a protection of some sort against oxidative damage we need to look further into and shit like that. But that's a GMO we've been eating for 8 to 10 fucking millennia.
Yeah. And
It's
here's
actually shown to be decent for us. And if you actually throw clean wood ashes from clean, has been burned, you can actually make sure there's enough mineral content to them to make more of the vitamins and vitamin precursors.
Here's another fun fact. Genetically modified organism.
Boom, bitch. Mic drop.
Yeah, when your mommy and daddy decided to make love to conceive you, they created you because your dad's sperm cell merged its genes with your mom's egg cell. It's basic human biology.
Well, and you also have anywhere between something like 50 and 150 mutations.
Yeah, you and your brothers and sisters are genetically, humans have been creating genetically modified organisms before Gregor Mendel even discovered the concept of genes.
The difference is we're doing it with precision now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that one. I love that one Miles Power video where he's talking about the ruby red grapefruits, the darling of the organic industry, and how they only exist because of atomic gardening. They bombarded a whole bunch of grapefruit plants with radiation, and one of the results, aside from the others that were like these, twisted abominations, one of the results was ruby red grapefruits, and that's how they developed that. And that's perfectly vegan and organic and good and proper and everything else, but GMO stuff, we can't have that.
Yeah.
That's why I tell people, if you're gonna buy something, don't even listen to the organic bullshit. If you're gonna buy meat, look at if you were to buy conventional meat, which again is pretty damn cheap, and there you could tweak the way they farm it if we took the subsidies out and invested in this infrastructure. I actually commented on the meat the response to the vegan. I think Shane Killian replied to my piece with that person that was talking about the subsidies, and I showed my reference. If we took that corn and we companion crop the animal feed corn to with fava beans, the yields will come up drastically because they tested this in China in 07, 06, 07, and 08, I think, around that time range, and 09, around that area. And they found it in poor phosphorus, high, I think it was poor phosphorus, high nitrogen soil. The corn went up by 43%, and the fava beans went up by 26%. Now imagine that in the better soil that we have over here, how many times they both go up. And then after the people harvest the last of it, they chop the plant down and let it stay in the ground, decay back into it, so they put back a little bit. Then they get the corn farm harvesting machine. You press the oil out of that makes biodiesel. That extends engine life in diesel engines and the farming equipment a little bit because it's
but phosphates. But phosphates are
starch out. You feed that to the cows; they get more out of it.
But phosphates are so hugely restricted now. That's one of the things that they really can't put back in the soil, which is really, really dumb.
Yeah, and then you can also, if you took the feces from the cows from those feedlots and digested them to put methane into the natural gas infrastructure, and took that digestate, put it into compost, to that compost in those areas, you kill weeds, cut fertilization and herbicide costs, and you also cut pest pressure costs that come from use of herbicides. It makes a chain reaction. When you read into ecology, it kind of tells you this. David Bloom actually explained some of this. And if you did this, I guarantee you could cut 43% of our acres and corn out of land use easily with this method, I'm sure of. Based on that poor soil test, potential's massive. And they've used it as an oil press distiller grain instead. Well, guess what? Wet it a little bit to get more value out of it. Your GHG emissions are half of what they were, even though cattle and livestock tend to be, I guess, 1.9% of all the GHG total. Although the vegans lie about that. And you use GMO corn, and it ensures that it does just as fucking well. And look what starts happening when you do these steps gradually over time. Make these investments. Use less land. Use far less water than you did. And the land starts healing itself faster. And your shit gets cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, organics, they're like, they cost at least 3 times as much. They're not as good for you. They don't even taste as well, in taste tests.
No. A lot of times they even use human shit on them. Direct shit. Don't even break it down. See?
Which is really bad.
Digestion and composting, it gets rid of the diseases that the literal shit piss water carries. And you get multiple use out of it before it's put on them.
Well, I mean, it's easier to use cow pats because cows are herbivores, and they have a different set of bacteria, and they actually have a whole different digestive system than we do. And that's what we would do. We go out to the cow pasture, and you had to kind of wait until they dried out and turned white. But we'd pick them up with the shovel, put them in the wheelbarrow, and put them in the compost pile and mix it all together. And then once it's all composted. But yeah, when you're using human or any other carnivore or omnivore or something like that, you got to really make sure that the bacteria has done its job before you add it to the compost.
Oh, yeah. The method digestion breaks a lot of stuff down. And then when you compost it, you got to make sure that shit gets good and hot for those potential for parasites is killed off before even using it. But a lot of places they grow organic. They don't even do that for enough.
Justino Garcia, so why
the businesses do it in the first place? Because they're really little shit subsidized. Blah, blah, blah.
Justino Garcia, so why is Whole Foods so popular? Marketing.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's all it is.
To be fair, John Mackey, the head of Whole Foods, he's actually a really nice guy, and he's actually on our side. But
I mean, there is this whole huge marketing engine, behind the organic movement, and they know they're spewing bullshit. They know that none of it is true. They know that these are all myths.
Yeah. Yeah, whole
because there's even been documents that have been leaked that show it's
Yeah, it's funny about Whole Paycheck because when South Park was doing the whole gentrification and SJW pandering parody, there was a Whole Foods at South Park, and Randy was getting there, and he was only getting 4 objects, which weren't really that big, but it cost him $40. It's like $40 for that.
I'm going to make this reply to Forest Sparrow. It's they brought powdered rock dust from drilling operations in quarries can be very enriching to soils. That's true. Some of that they call azomite when they sell it. Here's a great fertilizer for soils. I've done it for my green onions when I had a green onion patch in my backyard, grown in my box garden. You take urine and you mix wood ash is clean wood, like scrap wood, leaves, twigs, and sticks, and tree limbs. Burn that fully. Once you've done that, you get that ash, you mix it with azomite, and then you can either directly piss on them or you can have it in a jug and pour on, and you let that get cure out for a couple of months before you do any planting for that other season.
It's one thing that makes me laugh though are people that say it's like, oh, look at all the chemicals and preservatives in these food. It's like, oh, guess the horror. How dare they try to make the food last longer so it won't go rotten after only spending 1 or 2 days in your fridge.
Well, all you really need to do with not just powdered rock dust, but with basically anything like that is if you start off with a sample of fertile soil and you basically mix it 1-to-1, and add water and wait a while, wait for the natural bacteria in the soil to do its job, and then you do it again, and each time you do it, you double it, and pretty soon, you got a whole field full of, whole field worth of fertile soil.
Yeah. Yeah, there's way too much chemophobia these days, Shane. And yeah, going back to what I said about food, they're all like, yeah, well, do you know all these chemicals in this thing? Make this, this way. It's a lot more healthy and far less chemicals. It's like every single spice is a chemical,
Everything that exists is a chemical.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's what you look for. Shit that's known to be absolutely for certain to be carcinogenic, and that needs to be fucking just redone all over. And secondly,
it's like they'll
testing.
I mean, it's like they'll say, "Oh, well, this contains no chemicals." It's like, wow, is it concentrated dark matter then? Because any baryonic matter is going to be a chemical.
Honestly, speaking of chemicals, I don't know about you guys, but I could go for a ketamine Pop-Tart. Okay.
I had a progressive, this is Justino Garcia. Okay. I had a progressive say that farming in Cuba is the best thing Fidel Castro did because it is all organic. I have not heard that argument.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was organic or not, but even if it was, or regardless of whether it was or wasn't, the track record speaks for itself. It's pretty crappy.
By the way, Shane, speaking of a lot of these leftists, have no idea, how farming works. Apparently, I've actually heard the reason why, there's no food in Venezuela, even though they have a year-round growing season, is because initially, Chavez, he allowed, some property ownership of farmland, but the problem was that you had to be constantly productive in order to do that. So if you took a break, to let your soil and all that, get ready to recycle, he'd say, "Oh, you're being unproductive. We're taking your land away."
Yep. Yeah. And they burned out the soil.
Yep, they burned out.
That was the thing they've been saying, because one of the ways they've been trying to keep themselves fed is by foraging. And I mean, that used to be just a thing people did in Cuba just to do it, not because, in Venezuela did, not just to do it because there was plenty of food, but it was just kind of like a fun thing to do. You'd go forage and, you'd pick some stuff and come back with it. But now even, the natural stuff just isn't producing that much, either because the soil is bad or people have already picked it clean, or,
Yeah. Here's another fun fact that a lot of people don't tell you. A lot of people, like to hate on the Chinese, because they eat dogs and cats and whatnot. Well, here's the fun fact from what I've read. Contrary to popular belief, cats and dogs were not a common Chinese dish. The reason why they're commonly eaten today was because of Chairman Mao, because of his Great Leap Forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when his Great Leap Forward occurred, food, there was such a massive shortage that, people were eating cats, dogs, and the like, not because, they loved it, but because they were desperate. They were desperate for food and meat to feed their families. That's also why a lot of species like the panda and the tiger are critically endangered in China, was because Mao's, 7 Pest program caused massive environmental damage that basically destroyed their habitats.
Yeah.
I sent the meme in general of the chat of the server that we're in to show what I was referring to.
Ketamine Pop-Tarts.
Yeah, that was the joke I was referring to.
What is ketamine again?
Besides a source of many terrible nights and cards against humanity, it's a medication for it's an anesthetic drug.
Oh.
Knockout drug.
One of those drugs where if you take it and you're not planning to sleep, it makes you all loopy and funny.
And it'll knock your ass out, depending on the dosage.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah, I don't know much about it. I've never taken it.
Again, many of terrible Cards Against Humanity joke were made with it.
Oh, so it's one of those drugs, where it's like you take it and you're like, yeah, that's weird. I don't feel tired or anything. I think this thing's a big wave ripoff, and Yeah, you just fall over.
I'll DM you something else, Darth Finner. Give me a second.
Yeah.
What do you think of urban farming? I mean, have a garden if you want, but I don't think it's really going to be more than that. Although, if you think about it, like if you think about like a commercial building with the flat rooftops, I always wondered, why don't they just, put a few inches of topsoil there and plant some grass there, and then you can have some picnic tables out, I don't know why they don't do that. Maybe it's too much to maintain, but I think that'd be cool, have some, be able to go up on the roof for lunch and, it's a nice day, eat on the grass.
But it is.
I think in South Korea it just came over because really, until the Korean War, well, it was a combination of both China and America. A lot of people don't realize, but America has been interfering in Korea's affairs since the late 19th century.
Yeah.
What was it, the Russo-Japanese War?
Yeah.
Or the one before that? It was one of them. One of those wars. There were a bunch of wars.
Yeah, well, here's another thing about South Korea. People fail to realize South Korea was piss poor up until the 1980s, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
In fact, at one point, South Korea was pretty much just like North Korea. They had that one guy in charge who was put in power by the United States, and he was very authoritarian, and he was anti-communist, but he took his anti-communism to the extreme, and he would go after you even if you weren't a communist, simply because it's like, oh yeah, but you do the things that communists like to do, so you're a communist by proxy.
Yeah, but I mean, after the Korean War, they became more capitalistic, and it's been built up a lot more.
Yeah, I forgot.
And essentially when that happened in the 80s, when that all turned around, they just became capitalistic, and look how well they're doing now.
Oh,
and,
yeah,
I mean, for fuck's sakes, I would. If somebody asked me if I was to live in another country, what would be my top 3 choices, and I told them honestly, South Korea, if things were more stable politically, Nicoya Peninsula, or Okinawa. And they asked why the other two. I said, yeah, why those choices? I said, people there seem pretty lit. Funny thing got a lot of fucking sense.
Funny thing about Okinawa, I don't know if it's true, but because I've never been there, but I've heard from some people saying Okinawa is the best place to go to when you want to experience Japanese culture without having to follow Japanese rules. Like, I don't know if that's true, but I do know that the Okinawans, even though they look and speak Japanese, they don't like to consider themselves Japanese because they've kind of got a history with Japan, and it's not a good one.
Yeah, they got a real fucked up history with mainland Japan, and that's not even including the the 2 world wars, not even including those. But
it's been a while since I've read. It's been a while since I've read up on this, but it's all tied in with how Wushu turned into karate on Okinawa. It had to do with a lot of Okinawa and having to deal with Japanese oppression and things like that.
Yeah, that's parts of it. That's the big chunk of it.
Yeah.
Not all of it, but that's a big chunk of it. Yes.
Yeah, and I've actually heard a funny joke saying part of the reason why Asia, is fucked up politically is because a long, long time ago there were 2 great philosophers. One was Confucius and the other one was that other guy whose name I can't remember, but he
Lao
was.
Tzu?
Yeah, but he was, he was basically the world's first anarcho-capitalist because he pretty much believed you should be allowed to do whatever you want, whenever you want, as long as you're not hurting other people in the process, like by stealing from them. But Confucius ended up winning because he had the political connections.
Well, Confucius was a bit more authoritarian, but even Confucius wouldn't have been so bad, but it was captured by the legalists. Yeah. And those were the horrible people. Those were the ones who came up with all those wonderful methods of Chinese torture and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, fun fact actually about chopsticks. A lot of people say, well, chopsticks is because Confucius, believed that, you shouldn't be using tools that could potentially kill to eat your food. It's like, actually, no. What really happened was a lot of Chinese emperors didn't want peasants revolting, so basically he he restricted, the use of silverware because the steel used in silver and forks and knives could be used to make improvised weapons.
Yep. They were only allowed to be used by chefs for cooking. They couldn't be used for eating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they knew about knives, forks, and spoons. They had those. But
China.
MB Boyack, some people make money from urban gardening. If you have enough land to share a crop with your neighbor. Yeah, but it's not going to give you everything the community needs. You're still going to have to get food from elsewhere. But, I mean, why not? Garden fresh foods is good. Not
Justin
against
Garcia,
it. It's just not gonna...
Justino Garcia, I hope I said that right. Said that vegans could still suffer from high cholesterol and blood pressure from eating fried veggies, and I was like, well, that's very true, but it's did you guys know that cardiologists have actually developed a test that actually fractionate the cholesterols now that they actually
they've had
fractionate the different carrier particle fractions, like there's bad and good in both HDL and LDL. Mm-hmm. Like they're both.
Well, and it has more to well explained to me by my doctor. It has more to do with particle size than anything else.
Particle size, particle density, and what's sticky or what's not, and properties like those. And if they are all the above, then there's a sign of real bad inflammation in your system or some other kind of problem that's leading to it, and it needs to be addressed before they settle out of the blood at a certain spot and actually start to cause, atherosclerosis and endothelial damage that comes from that blockage forming.
It is amazing how many of our health problems are related to inflammation.
Yeah. And MB Boyack says Marco Polo never mentioned chopsticks. And contrary to popular belief, he never mentioned spaghetti either. Yeah, spaghetti and pasta didn't actually come from China. It came from North Africa, if I recall correctly. Yep, it was.
I think Europeans and North Africans are both developing their own primitive beginnings of it, if I recall, for thousands of years before. And I think Alton Brown talked about that on Good Eats a few times, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's another misconception that some black separatist people like to claim is that the first, civilized humans were from Africa, when in actuality we've now recently discovered, there's species of humans that are just as old as the ones found in Africa, but they're found in North America, they're found in Europe, and yes, they are showing signs that they had different skin colors.
For example, we had your average Native American tribe was a mixed Paleolithic Europeans, Asians, and Neanderthal man.
Yeah.
Like, that's blatant. And ever since, that was found, they found Neanderthal bones, ever since that's been found, that's kind of cemented that. Because I was always saying, I bet a bunch of ancient, early humans came into this side of the planet in waves. I went with that hypothesis. I stuck with it because I was pretty sure it was going to be proven theory, and I wish I could have bet on it with some archaeologists.
We know
I won some fucking money with that if I betted on it. And then
we know out of Africa happened more than once, because humans originated from Africa, but then whatever it was 60,000-70,000 years ago, there was that global freeze, and it basically killed off all of the humans everywhere in the world except for, I think it was Equatorial Africa, and there was like less than 10,000 breeding pairs. And then after that was over, they just went back and reclaimed everything again.
Yeah. Fun fact: I actually read that that they actually found out what actually caused the Ice Age, and it wasn't actually caused by the shifting of continents. Apparently, it was caused by a super volcano that erupted somewhere out in Indonesia, basically.
Well, that's not really enough time for a lot of continental movement. The continents move really slowly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all a super volcano. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you spew that much volcanic ash into the air. Yeah, it'll cool it.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's actually.
But then after the cooling, because it also spews CO2 into the air, after the cooling period, you actually get a warming period, which makes people a lot more productive.
Yeah.
Well, and here's another thing. Yep, and here's another fun thing, Shane. And I actually saw this from Weird History. Every time someone says, "Oh, today is the worst year ever because of all this," just say, "No, the absolute worst year. This has actually been proven by historians and anthropologists. The worst year ever in human history was 526 AD."
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yep.
we've talked about that before.
Yeah,
I was actually trying to find the most boring year, and I think I've settled on. I think it's like 1488. It is the year that James VI of Scotland, I think, was became king, and that's like one of the few things that happened. There's only like 3 or 4 things that happened that year, and nothing else happened.
Yeah. 526 AD. For those who don't know or weren't there when we talked about it, that was the year when not one but 2 super volcanoes erupted, which caused a micro ice age, throughout parts of Europe. That was when the first case of bubonic plague, at the time known as the Justinian plague, came up, and there were also a series of wars that were going on at the time. So.
Yeah.
Next time you see an old person saying, "Oh, today is chaotic, we're all doomed, everything's gonna happen," yeah, everyone thought that,
Yeah, but it was like in this year, I think it's 1488. I mean, there were probably wars going on, but there weren't like any major developments in any of them, and it's just like just a couple of things happen. I mean, I'm sure more stuff, but not anything significant enough to be recorded by history.
Yeah.
I can't find a more boring year than that as of yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely not going to be 2020. We know that.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, 2020 is relatively boring, and that's the reason why the media has to hype up everything. I mean, it is pretty funny because a lot of people were trying to say, "Oh no, COVID-19 is a really bad thing. It's really that dangerous." Yet, and one person brought this up. It's like, yeah, but I remember when the swine flu pandemic of 2009 occurred. Happened there, was every morning before school we had to watch a thing that said, "And remember, kids, when you sneeze, do it in your shoulder or in a pocket, and immediately wash your hands afterwards." They weren't saying, okay, all non-essential businesses have to shut down. Everyone has to be 6 feet apart from each other and whatnot. We weren't doing that.
This kind of thing, humans have been putting up with this for thousands of years. This is just the first time we freaked out about it.
Yeah. And again, I think the only reason we're freaking out about it is because it's 2020 and this will be the upcoming election. So a lot of politicians are saying, especially the Democrats are saying, "Hey, we got to do something so when 2020 rolls around, we can say, see, we did something. Donald Trump, he didn't do anything." That's also why a lot of people are bashing Donald Trump if he even mentions, COVID-19, even if he's just repeating, what the health officials said.
Yeah.
Like,
Amy Boyack, definitely intercontinental shipping went on a lot earlier in history than we think. Yeah, intercontinental trade routes go back at least 80,000 years. That's what they can prove, and probably 100,000 years. And that would just be like, I mean, it may have been a lot longer than that, but that's just, what the current evidence we have says.
Yeah, and actually, Shane, you brought this up in, the podcast that got removed. You mentioned how the media was yelling at Trump, because he said something, and they said, "Oh, Trump's, spewing BS again out of his butt." It's like, no, he was just repeating what other governments told him. Yeah.
Well, I mean, when he was talking about hydroxychloroquine and the media jumped on, all he was doing was saying what was on the CDC's website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I think that's the only reason we're blowing this out of proportion is because it came out during the 2020 election, which is why they're trying to do that, because they're trying quote unquote do something. Whereas 2009, when the swine flu outbreak occurred, there was no election going on, so there was no incentive to politicize it.
I don't know. There's a lot of this going on all over the world. It's not just America.
Yeah, well, I know China's trying to politicize, COVID-19 by using it as an excuse, to get more involved in Hong Kong.
Yeah, I don't know when the Silk Road started, JC.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a long time.
Yeah, I agree with. I would agree with your assessment, Fenra. And there's a lot of people going around screaming, "Right, it's going to be a civil war." I was like, give me a sec. Excuse me. It was like, oh my
Yep,
god, it's
vitamins
going
or
to be a
chemicals.
civil
Yep.
war, and I was like, yeah, this is
That's what.
just.
That's why, I will say one thing that kind of grinds my gears that I see with some libertarian groups, like especially, certain people in the back alley, is they act like the Boogaloo's going to come and it's going to be this big cataclysmic event and all that, and I'm like, no, it's not. It's, I mean, I don't get me wrong, I do think, a quote unquote Boogaloo is going to occur, but like that old poem says, I can't remember who wrote it. It's not going to come with a bang, but a whimper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah, vitamins. But just yes, vitamins are chemicals. In fact, they're amines, and that's what vitamin stands for. Vital amine. That's where that word comes from.
Yeah.
And expand on your other point, Fenrir, your one you just made. I noticed that people that want to that talk about the term boogaloo. There's two uses for the term, and the second use bridges off into two variants, right?
All I know that is from what Shane told me is the Boogaloo was a crappy dance move from the 1980s.
Well, it goes back to like the 50s or something.
Where the name come from? It was a shitty sequel to a rather successful dancing themed movie.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, but the way they use
it, the dance itself is from like the 50s or 60s. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you dance the Boogaloo?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's actually it's actually in a Monkey song. I know you taught your sister the Boogaloo. Boogaloo.
And let's see. Oh yeah, the use of it in this case, it either means a civil war or a total societal collapse, which would be the second one, which could splinter into two ways it could possibly go about. In the case of Boogaloo, which means all out militarized conflicting back and forth, or everybody civil warring with themselves.
I've actually heard a lot of wars started like that. Like, I don't know if it's true or not. This is just something I read. About one time. Like, there was one old person who was talking about who was like, like a 10-year-old, during World War II when the Germans invaded Poland and whatnot. And they jokingly said, contrary to popular belief, the first battles of World War II weren't even that violent. We think of, the Germans invading Poland as storming in with tanks and airplanes. But actually, I was on a border town between Poland and Germany, and when the Germans invaded, it wasn't like a shot was fired. It was just one day everyone went to sleep, and when we woke up, we found, why are there all these German guys, in the cafes and and standing in the streets? What are they doing here? And they're like, oh yeah, we're invading. Yeah, some wars, that's basically how they open. They don't open, with an enemy just coming in guns a-blazing. It's just one day you go to bed, you wake up, and suddenly you see all these guys with, speaking different languages at your restaurant saying, what are you guys doing here?
Yeah, but what's going on right now is there's a bunch of people using the George Floyd killing as a way to try to attempt a coup, is really what's going on. And it's just a bunch of rioting thugs and gangsters and
he wants to know what's our opinion on Chaz.
It's just not commie shit that's gonna fail once again.
It ain't gonna work. It ain't gonna work because the people didn't pay attention to the Spanish Civil War.
Nope.
Yeah, people. The Spanish Republic didn't fail because of Franco. It failed because of their political economic plans.
Oh my god, and apparently now they're saying their little farm thing failed because a couple of Proud Boys came in and trampled it or something like that. And not that it had no chance of working, because what they did was like put down a bunch of cardboard and like an inch of soil and stuck the plants right on it, still in their plastic pots, like they were going to root that way.
Yeah.
They're so stupid. They hurt.
Yeah, it's already failing because, and not to mention, there's micro riots within it, and nothing's going to be done because no one wants to call the cops, and And some of the cops, even though I'm as anti-police as you can get, they're actually kind of being funny by saying, because when they call, they say, "Oh, well, we can't do anything because you're not part of the city. You're an autonomous zone, remember? So that's your problem now."
And what's really crazy is a lot of and all this, and another thing to also point out is these where these are all things are all happening is solely for the most part in the gun control, the red flag, and the far
Yep.
leftist and propagated hotspots, right?
Yeah.
Where it's mostly the far left shit and the gun control and the red flag lenience and shit are at their highest. Except for New Orleans. New Orleans didn't have riots.
Places where people have guns don't have riots. That's why I'm not worried about the riots come here. All of my neighbors have guns.
Yeah.
That's literally, that's what this is. It's just rioting and attempted a political coup that's failing and eating itself alive gloriously.
Mhm.
And what's really funny, people, the general public that didn't involve themselves with this shit are opening their eyes to smelling the rotten fecal matter and burnt coffee.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of this funny video I saw. I saw a video from the LA riots, and it was talking about Koreatown and the famous Koreatown roof gunners and all that. And they're like, "Oh my God, the Koreans! They've got a shotgun. Oh, one of them has an Uzi. They've got old military M1 carbines and all that." And what they're completely ignoring is that Koreatown is largely intact while the rest of LA is burning.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know what those fuckers are complaining about. I love rooftop Koreans.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because yeah, and no joke, they were actually, the Koreans were actually deliberately showing off their guns, not because they were gung ho, rednecks. It was their way of saying, "Listen, if you even think about coming into our place for the sole purpose of looting it, the only thing you're gonna be leaving with is a load of buckshot to your face."
Kind of makes me want to say, hey, can we have some more Korean-owned businesses around here?
Yeah.
Let's see what we can do about that.
Yeah.
All right, it's 10 o'clock, so we need to start
Okay.
thinking about good title for a song. All My Neighbors Have Guns. Sounds good. Anything y'all want to
Yeah.
wind this up with?
That sounds like All My Neighbors Have Guns. That sounds like something Primus would write.
No, it'd have to be a country song.
Well, Primus did have even though they're funk, they were famous for like some of their songs having like a country feel to it, like Winona's Big Brown Beaver.
Yeah. All My Neighbors Have Guns is definitely a country song, and someone should make it happen. I hereby release the title for that.
Yeah. All my neighbors have guns.
Yeah. And funny, you can riot and not catch COVID-19. Yeah. All right, let's start getting our final thoughts out. Anything you absolutely have to get off your chest?
Nope. Well, I mean, Shay, there is something that's on my chest that I've been noticing lately. I've been noticing that my body's been acting very funny lately. I'm just kidding.
It's called puberty.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I'm
just kidding. Yeah.
I think this year kind of hit retardville. It's very interesting to watch, to say the least.
Tia Gopher, you've been silent for a while. Anything you want to bring up?
I think he fell asleep or went AFK and forgot to turn off.
All right.
Okay.
Funny how COVID took a backseat after the ride started. Yeah, that's how it goes. Short-term memory, on to the next thing.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for everyone who's given me support, including, and I can never see the people because it scrolls off but someone gave me the super chat, so I thank that person, and thanks to everyone in the chat and everyone who does support me, even as YouTube decides to take down my videos and not tell me why. And thanks for joining me, y'all. Chris, Geographer, and Wes.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having us.
All right, no problem,
And
Buzz.
let me ask you a little question. How this sound? I want to try it. How does a queso baconator sound?
Queso
Does-
Baconator?
Queso baconator.
It sounds delicious, but instant heart attack. Yeah, it's like that one episode of
Instead of the pre-sliced fake cheese, you serve it with the.
reminds me of that episode from the Boondocks where he wants to open up a restaurant where he serves deep fried lasagna and Luther burgers, and they're delicious and hit. But the one kid's like, "Grandpa, you can't serve this. You're gonna kill someone."
Hey, another $1.99 from Justino Garcia. Thank you so much. Pair character doing a shaka sign with his hand saying cool.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Until next time, stay strong